Well, my tātou, ka nui te mihi ki a koutou I tāmai nei, tau toko te kaupapa o tēnei te mihi ki a koutou. Tuataki ka mihi atu ki o tātou Thailand, nā nei stita, nā nei te whakaotina, o ngā mi katoa. Ka mihi hoki ki te manu o tēnei whenua, ngā tātou ki o rākei, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, tēnā koutou. Mihi hoki ki o tātou tēne mate. Ko wihi atu ki te tō te arai, I ngā mate, haere atu rā. Ka te ono tātou hono, tātou ki a rātou, tātou ki a tātou te unga kanohi ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Mihi pi, ki a koe te tai kōrero, I whakatau mai, I whāruki mai, I tēnei hui I tēnā ata, tēnei mihi ki a koe, tēnā koe, mai koe. Mihi hoki, ki ngā manuhiri tuārangi, mai o te ino momoia, tēnā kōrero, nā māwharima, ki waima nui a mātou, ki waima nui a tātou. Hiri noa, ki a koutou ngā tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ko waia, te tāpo tōku māma, ko mawa te maunga, ko te awanui te moana, ko takitini te waka, ko Ngāti Rangi nui te iwi, ko paparoa te marae. Te taha o tōku papa, ko hukirangi te maunga, ko rapa te awa, ko Ngāti Whakatāurua te waka, ko te kaua iwi, ngā hapu, ko Matawā te marae, ko ngā koe mea Ngāti Hini, ngā iwi, ko Alby Marsh tōku ingoa. Mahi ana hau ki te rangahara Mara Kai, B3. So kia ora everyone, morning. My name is Alby Marsh, and I'm researcher aligned with B3, Better Water Biosecurity, as well as plant and food research and asking constant for those of you who don't know me, so kia ora. My talk is Kaitiakitanga and Māori solutions to myrtle rust. So we set out on our journey to engage our people around the country. And some of the key questions we were asking was, priorities for them when it comes to myrtle rust. What are their knowledge needs? Are there any special stories from your region that align you, that can lead you to your taonga? And why is that taonga important to you? We also asked about ecosystem health and whether the decline of ecosystems had contributed to the onset of myrtle rust and the vulnerability of some of our taonga to these diseases. Do we actually know what an unhealthy ecosystem looked like and what contributed to that? And the other one is, how do we measure the illness, the wellness of those systems? So our first question was one of the main priorities, because we were seeing rapid decline in a lot of our native forest areas, to the point where a lot of these species were becoming functionally extinct, so no longer reproducing seed, so in that decline stage. One of the key pūrākau or stories that connect you to these species and why they're important to you, because we know around the country a lot of the taonga are threat. So this is te waka warere kohu, down Te Araroa. It's the oldest group tower in the country. Set the confirmation of that one. But yeah, this is under threat. And One of the key questions we asked was, what would that mean to you if this tree was no longer there? You know? And the response was, well, this is our connection to our tupuna. You know, this is our connection to our history. This is our connection to us. And this is why we were doing a lot of our kōrero around the country to understand the significance and the relationship that people had to these special species. So we undertook a series of conversations to understand what those special stories were. And interviewing people in and around the country. So this is Tauranga Moana. This is Ngāti, and this is Ngāti up north, Ngāti. And we were able to understand, you know, what they regarded as their connection, what was special to them with the species that were now under threat. But we also needed to know what they didn't know. So what were their knowledge needs? Did they know what a mutated species was? Did they know what myrtle rust looked like? And that's why we undertook a series of programs to raise that awareness of what myrtle rust was first and foremost, and what it was doing to a lot of their tonga. So, got a graph? Graham did a lot of that for us. We attracted TV1 down into Ngāti, and that was all designed just to raise that awareness about what this disease was doing to a lot of our special species. We had training programs to the rowing. We undertook a lot of this training in the country for us because our people hadn't come across this before. So we needed to, you know, build that understanding first and foremost of what mutations were. A lot of them didn't know they were mutations like the kami with the Māori and cow. But there were also other species that they weren't aware of. Monitoring and surveillance programs, we undertook some of them in and around the countryside. Again, bringing our people into the fold to be participants rather than observers of what we were doing. So that was key for us, you know, active participation. We conducted interviews to understand what was special, what was part of Te Ao Māori that we hadn't considered. And that was really important to us. Having wānanga in and around the country, again, to understand what the Māori element could be that we should be introducing into this program. So we come up with a diagram like this that sort of laid out some of those special areas that weren't being considered the mainstream research that was being undertaken. And the key for us was up the top. So, you know, you've got some atua that oversee the domains and the realms that we revere. But then out to the side, you've got things like those special stories, the pūrākau. And then, having mentioned before, whakapapa, what connects us to these species. And everything has a whakapapa, and that's what we're looking to preserve, is that whakapapa. And then there's the mana for the species, the mana for the whenua, the mana for our tupuna as well. And at the bottom of that is whanaungatanga, so those connections as well. And in the middle is sort of us, and that's that kaitiaki approach that we look to take. A lot of us regard ourselves as kaitiaki, those carers of these special species. And some of us, not all of us, undertake some of, you know, these processes and protocols. Like pūrākau, for instance, there's the pūako about rata, going into the forest, not seeking permission before he cut down the tree for his canoe, because he'd go back the next day, the tree was standing. And the point of the story is you seek permission before you go and help yourself to something. Rahui is that temporary restriction. So, just letting something rest. An environment is in a depressed state, it can recover itself. It doesn't always need our help. So looking at those signs that actually guide us in different areas of our life. Matarikis are talking to us, because that's the signal, that's the sign that signals the start of our new year. And we're looking more and more to our native estate to come up with solutions for a lot of the issues that we now face. And some of them are these pests, are these diseases, and are these diseases that we now confront with. The other question we asked was around healthy ecosystems. So what does a healthy ecosystem look like? What contributes to it? What is present in a healthy ecosystem that is absent in an unhealthy ecosystem? So what contributes to that decline? Is it also a combination of plants working together in unison that create that environment of health, rather than separate species planted in, say, rows that we think is going to contribute to the overall health? So we see a lot more people planting rows and rows of mānuka, because mānuka is meant to promote these healthy properties. But it might be a combination of mānuka and something else. Have we ever considered that? And that's what we should be looking at, what grows naturally. That's why we should be looking at what grows naturally in our native estate. We don't see rows and rows of single species, they do mānuka. But the other side, what you see in a natural environment is clusters of plants working together to create that environment of health. And this little matrix here has helped us to understand why we have health, why we have unhealthy areas within our environment. And those combinations can help us actually, decide, yes, that is what is missing, that is what contributes to the area of unhealth. So a combination of healthy and disease. So is the absence of disease directly attributed to the protection provided by the environment and those plants growing in that environment? That's consideration. Healthy and disease. So obviously it's a healthier state because no interaction, it's just its natural interaction, but unhealthy and disturbed means that there may be an issue with plants, with pests or diseases in that area. Healthy and disturbed, again, that might be us going in there and cutting tracks. It might be some of the animals going in there and browsing on those plants that of course have unhealthy. There's also this book that Pāmagao has written, and his view is of the land as well, the people living well. And he has 6 key principles within this book. The whenua or papatūānuku is the source of all life. Everything we eat basically comes from the whenua, natural food, I mean. We are not the centre of the universe. We've got to work with the environment around us, not try and dominate it. But you look around us and we've just changed the whole landscape. and that is for profit. In most cases, certain or monocultural cropping systems have changed the landscape that we know. The Māori is the web of connection that sustains life. Māori is the life force, and that's the connection that does sustain life. The tangata or people are not the master of the Māori. We are part of that Māori, and we should be embraced by it. No individual person is more important than any other. And we see a lot of instances here where people have said, well, we've bought this bit of land, we want to renovate, or we want to, put a house on there. That tree's got to go. That's us dominating, the landscape around us. We give special care to the tiniest living creatures. Every creature is here for a purpose, and it serves a purpose. And that's something that we should be, aware of. There's also ngā atua effect. And why do we think Tāngata Māori has become vulnerable to the onset of new pests, new diseases, and diseases like Myrtle? There is a thought pattern out there that Tāwhiri Mātia is seeking retribution from his brother Tāne for separating his parents. Now, that's something to consider, because Myrtle rust moves around on the wind. So that's, some of the talking that has been happening, and that's some of the kōrero that was part of our one. That to us is what ecosystem health is all about. You don't see lines and lines of single species in them. You see those clusters all working together to create that environment of health. One of the old kaumātua from up north looked at his land, and Ngāti Hine, they do quite a bit of forestry up there. But their philosophy is, and I can't read it, yeah. But our whānau, within, want to hold this land for the generations that follow the perpetuity. That's the first. The second one is to ensure that the quality of the water coming in or exiting the property is better or the same or better than what it entered. And the third is that we care for public tournament and leave our whenua in better position than you receive it. So some final thoughts from here is we cannot continue to extract without verification. And research cannot be closed source. There are other sources of information that we should be considering in the research that we're undertaking. Artificial inputs are not the only solution. Is there a natural alternative? And they are becoming more prominent, these natural solutions. And rongoa is something that springs to mind. The whenua is the source of your life. And we need to care for Papatū Anō. If you can live here, you only need time.
Make sure to turn it on.
I think Alby, I'm Leah, I'm from Australia, and I was really curious about you talking about the training programs and how complex it is to teach someone who's not a botanist how to recognize something that's as generic as like invitations species. Like what were some of the main
You want to ask the trainer?
Yeah. How did you, because something that I really would like to know more about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
Thanks. So what we did is Alby organised for the groups and we actually went to the groups. We went to the whenua, we went to the land where they were working, where they lived, and we looked in their environment to ID the trees that they had. So we weren't trying to get them to identify every single retating species that's there, but to understand what they had in their backyard. So we worked in the field on the land with them to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Very good talk. Regarding healthy ecosystem, I have very maybe bad question for you. In Brazil, where naturalist originally came from, naturalist was never a concern for native mutation. And some scientists, they think that probably some microbiome or something else can be a natural enemy of naturalist. So my question is it possible that we bring natural enemies from Brazil to New Zealand? Because in New Zealand, probably not just prosperity of life without any natural enemies. And probably it would be better without applying fungicides, without all chemical introduction. We just bring an enemy. So is it acceptable or it can cause a lot of concern for native ecosystems?
At least authorised person to be able to answer that. But my thinking around that is over time, our species, I would probably relate it to what happened during COVID and how COVID sort of affected quite a few people because that was their first exposure to it. And a lot of our mutation species that were susceptible and affected by Myrtle, it was the same sort of scenario for them, the first introduction, very susceptible. We had vaccines for some people, there were vaccines that helped them build themselves. We haven't got anything like that, so if we were to introduce something that would help the build-up of resistance or resistance in the species or tolerance to that species, that would be something that would have to require quite a bit of discussion about the pros and cons of that. It wouldn't be something that would happen overnight. It would take a little bit of time. That's what good.
One more question?
Dr. Alby, hey, I was just really curious, did any particular nature-based solutions come out of your mind, like in your conversations with people?
So what we did in the experiments that we conducted was use some native extracts and inoculated plants and then tested see on those, and the results weren't that terrific. They were very encouraging when compared to some of the chemical solutions that we tested, even to the point where the untreated plant actually was doing better. So yeah, it wasn't encouraging. But what we didn't get to is the point where we're using combinations of extracts together. And we feel that given a bit more time and money, we could have tested those to maybe come up with a better result, I suppose.
All right. All right, well, let's thank Alby again for a great talk.